From Software's Souls games are fantastic. You don't need me to tell you this, you don't need anyone to tell you this. Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, each of these games were capable of sending shockwaves on the gaming community, and that's not to count their other IPs such as Armored Core and Sekiro. It's safe to say that after playing each Souls game, my perspective on what a game needs to be great shifted. I have fond memories of adventuring the world of Yharnam in Bloodborne during summer after immediately buying a PS4. I remember all the auras lying beneath the world, the monster design that kept making me recoil in disgust, that one funny glitch where that asshole sword would not die and kept throwing projectiles at the boss, and I still beat it and felt like a king. Every day, I pray to whatever Sony gods to bring us Bloodborne on the PC so that I can finally throw this stupid fucking brick in the trash. I remember every boss fight in Dark Souls 3, the Abyss Watcher, Pontiff Sullivan, Nameless King. My god, each of these bosses were so damn good. I remember how I spent hours on my fashion and kept taking pictures to use as my wallpaper. Dark Souls 2... Elden Ring is what I'm currently playing, and yet I'm making brand new memories about discovering that city in the sky, exploring the capital of Leyndell, finishing Ranni's side quests, Astel, Khalid, Radahn, the Earth Tree, and oh my god, Miyazaki, stop putting toxic swamp in your fucking game! Each of these games made me think differently about video games, and every time I'm finished with one, I go through a massive depression because no other game will be able to satisfy me the same way they do. However, the more I play them, the more I forget about the most important one of the bunch. The first Dark Souls. Dark Souls was my first game of the Soulsborne genre, and I keep repeating to my friend and people around me that it is one of my favorite games ever made. I have positive feelings whenever I think about the game, and when I think gaming, its name comes to me just like that. Yet, weirdly enough, I'm not that excited about replaying it. Why would I replay the first game when I can just play Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne? Hell, playing Elden Ring right now is making me look at every previous title and wondering if any of them will be playable after I'm done with the game. To put it simply, the sequels are kinda muddying my perspective of the first game. It has been a long ass time since I touched Dark Souls. It's a normal thing that the sequels would improve on the first game, but I still find it interesting how the more I play FromSoft's new Souls game, the more I forget about the original game that started it all for me. So I decided it was time for a little revisit of the game. I want to find out why Dark Souls 1 captured my heart in the past, how it compares to future games, and if I still like it as much as I did. Because if there's one thing I remember, it's how Dark Souls was important to me. Let me put you into context. The Age of Darkness rules over the world, until the first flame is born and found. Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, Gravelord Nino, and the Witch of Izalith each claimed a Lord Soul from it, the fourth and last one found by the furtive and forgotten pygmy. With the power of the flame, the three Lord waged war against the everlasting dragons, committing mass genocides against their kind with the help of Sif the Scaleless. After founding and reigning over Lordran for years, the flame starts to fade. Gwyn, alongside his knights, heads to the kiln of the first flame, and sacrifices himself to feed the fire. This prolonged the Age of Fire, but only for a short while, before it started fading again. In addition, because of Gwyn's action, mankind was afflicted with the undead curse, the dark sign branding their bodies. This curse would forcefully revive the dead, losing their humanity alongside it. If incapable of recovering said humanity, that undead would soon become mad and lose all sanity, becoming hollow. Introducing you, an undead with that same curse stuck in the undead asylum to rot and lose reasons for eternity, when suddenly, someone dumps a key that leads to your freedom. You kill the asylum demon, escape this place, and get transported by a giant crow to the kingdom of Lordran, or at least, what remains of it. Your goal? Ring the two bells of awakening, one above and one below. Thus, your journey truly begins. This was my first time experiencing this approach to storytelling. The stories I was used to would happen during major events with the main character at the center of those, and most of the time their actions would usually save the world. Instead, Dark Souls dropped me in the aftermath of those major events, and not only that, the world is dead. The kingdom of Lordran is desolated and destroyed, abandoned by the mighty and time itself. There's not a lot of context to explain what happened either. I was stuck figuring it out. Other than the intro cutscene talking about the First Flame and the Four Lords, not much else was given. Well, that and the fact I apparently have to ring the Bells of Awakening or whatever that means, but the game basically patted me on the back and said, "You figure it out, champ. Look, a cool graveyard. Look, a cool underground city with ghosts." Dark Souls was my first experience with dark fantasy, a subgenre to fantasy that usually twists fantasy elements into more grotesque and disturbing themes. They're super well known for their gloomy and sad tone, which I am not and still ain't the biggest fan of. Real life is already dark fantasy enough, I don't need my media to finish the knot on the news for me. And somehow, I'm still bewitched by the concept of the First Flame in the Age of Darkness. Even if it's dark fantasy, mini-child Leo inside of me can't help but squee in wonder at the mention of a war between gods and dragons. Sure, the existential dread sets in once we start talking about the implication of the undead curse, but the world itself was created and written in a way that I still find super unique and original to this day. The First Flame, the Four Lords, the undead curse, those concepts are kind of similar to certain one I know, but this time they were twisted in ways that I genuinely found interesting. Not only that, but the character you make is stuck with the undead curse, but is also meaningless and insignificant in this world. I mean, you do not matter, and people are way too happy to remind you of that. The game is most happy to remind you that you are not a chosen hero or fated savior of this world. I mean, most games like to set you up to be the chosen one, or someone of importance due to some ancient lineage that defeated the gods thanks to the demon blood. Not Dark Souls. Dark Souls will look at you and go, "You are dead, go kill him, man." As far as the world is concerned, I'm just another undead that thinks he's special, and will probably turn hollow with due time. As someone who always hated fate and destiny, shit like introducing a random ass dude as the protagonist only to find out that it wasn't really coincidence that he managed all these cool feats, his dad was actually a Shinigami, or he was the child of this important person, this kind of setup is perfect for me. It doesn't focus on your character as an important person, it simply lets you decide how much importance you want to shove inside your character, and then let the world and lore speaks its tale. My character isn't the rebirth of one of the Four Lords or the man that has a dark soul or whatnot. He's just a guy. He's just some shitty undead that got unlucky. This could be anyone, and this is why I still remember the full lore to this day. I even started role-playing in these games a bit, making up story for the character I create, because unlike other games, your character truly is a fucking nobody. And I love it. It's also only possible for me to do this cringy ass roleplay because of how much depth Lordran has. One of the aspects that I remember fondly about Dark Souls is the fact that Lordran is a breathing space. Lots of games try to achieve this, but none do it as well as Dark Souls in my opinion. Exploring Lordran is an experience by itself due to how beautiful and connected the world is. I can get lost for hours in this place. I got lost for hours in this place, and the entire time I had fun because going off the beaten path is a whole ass adventure waiting for you. And you'll probably land in an area where you aren't supposed to be yet. You'll get punished for it, but the fact that you can go there is fucking precious in modern gaming. It also helps that those locations in the game feel like an actual aftermath of the flame dying out. The game doesn't tell you its story with cutscenes and mandatory dialogue from random NPC who's willing to explain the lore and plot. The story is in the world, and it's up to you to discover it by playing the game and exploring. Every building and ruins you see has a story to tell, making you stop, take in the sight, and question as to what exactly happened. Anne Orlando, Darkroot Bass, and Los Isolas each have a history that begs to be discovered, and traversing these areas only pique your curiosity even more. Item descriptions and NPC will tell you some of the lore as well, but you'll glean just as much, if not more, from just taking in the world. I love exploration from the start, but now it isn't just exploration for the sake of advancing in a video game. I'm exploring to get answers from my endless questions as to what happened. It doesn't feel like I'm playing a video game at times, it feels like I'm on an expedition, researching about a dead civilization and kingdom. Lots of games have you explore open world filled with wonder and joy while giving you a tour of the story, but not a lot of games are willing to just let you figure it out by yourself, take and decide, and just breathe. I remember exploring Anor Londo and having my breath taken away by the image of an untouchable, untainted city, only to venture through it and find it empty and silent, and getting this feeling of dread creeping up my spine. I remember feeling intense fear going through the depth and catacombs because of how dark and claustrophobic it was. I remember trudging through Blighttown and wondering what kind of sick, twisted piece of worthless scumfuck would invent this place. I also remember the first shortcut I found in Undead Parish. This harmless elevator took me straight back to Firelink Shrine. And how relieved, but excited I was. Relieved because the video game is hard and I really did not want to die and start over to the whole checkpoint. And excited because I never imagined that this weird part of Firelink Shrine would be connected to an area I've been exploring for so long in such a believable way. What makes Dark Souls work for me, and what its sequels somewhat lacks, is its interconnected map. These aren't random locations in a straight line. This is a weird pillar-like structure where each place connects together through various means. Undead Burg connects with Darkroot Basin, but also connects with the Depth and Undead Parish. Blighttown connects with the Valley of Drakes, which connects to New Londo Ruins, Darkroot Basin, fuck it connects to Gwyn's personal bathroom. If you want, you can easily skip certain bosses and do whatever the fuck you want to do. You even have the option to pick the Master Key at the beginning, which unlocks most of the doors in the game. Also, remember those two areas that bullied most newcomers? Yeah, those are late game areas. Having fun yet? Dark Souls level design is often attributed as a Metroidvania, which is my favorite genre of video game, unsurprisingly enough. So it's not a surprise that Dark Souls 2 and 3, and even Bloodborne, don't compare to Dark Souls 1. Both sequels of Dark Souls lets you teleport and fast travel to locations instead of adventuring through them, and most of them are in a straight line, so you have no reason to tread back on familiar grounds. Once you get through an area, might as well TP there and be done with it. Hell, some areas can only be accessed through teleportation, which just fucking sucks. Bloodborne is the closest to this design philosophy, with some pretty neat shortcuts here and there, but the world is still so linear. It just helps that Dark Souls doesn't allow you to fast travel before the later half of the game. At the beginning, if you need to come back to an area, you have to walk, and while it can be somewhat tedious, it also helps tremendously in making a mental map of Lordran. Elden Ring, the latest in the Souls-like from FromSoft, brought back this kind of exploration with a giant map that you can go anywhere, and surprise, surprise, I fucking love it, and the game is so much cooler because of it. The oppressive atmosphere, the interconnected architecture, the people and monsters inhabiting this dead kingdom. Lordran feels real, and because it feels real, it is a treat to explore, and my favorite part of the game. Of course, Dark Souls isn't just an exploration game. Lordran is dangerous, so you'll have to fight. Dark Souls exploration is one of the reasons why I love this game, but the other reason lies in the combat of the game. In case you've been living under a rock, Dark Souls has a reputation for being kind of a hard game. Like most action RPGs, the combat in Dark Souls is kind of simple. You can attack, charge and attack, block, dodge, heal, and parry. Very simple combat. Unlike other action RPGs, Dark Souls is unforgiving to the player. In most games, if you pull out the wrong move or you get a little greedy with your offense, you can immediately block or dodge, canceling most, if not all, animation of your previous attack. Again, these games usually try to make you feel unbeatable, like a badass, which Dark Souls does not care for. Instead, each attack has an animation that needs to be finished before you do anything. This includes dodging and healing yourself, which means any action from the player is a commitment similar to marriage. Healing is also something you need to time, because John's soul over here will stop everything, and I mean everything, any momentum, and pull out his Sunny D and sip it before putting that drink back in his pocket. And now you may resume playing the video. It's such a different way of controlling a character that whenever I play Dark Souls or any Souls-like, I always need to be patient until the Souls-like mentality takes over my brain before getting good at those games. Then I come back to other games while still being in that mentality, and I'm just destroying everything because I can just do whatever I want with barely any consequences. You know what's the bad shit insane part? I enjoy this. I love difficult games. I yell at them, I swear like a sailor when I die, I rethink every decision of my life whenever I'm stuck at a bad part, but I love them nonetheless. Something about overcoming a challenge against all odds triggers the warrior inside my soul, an urge to prove myself that I can beat a bunch of code-forming pixels on the monitor. It's what makes or kill my self-esteem. I only gained such appreciation for difficult games after playing Dark Souls. And the thing about Dark Souls is that it isn't that hard. If you are smart and take your time with an enemy, you'll find that it isn't all that challenging. Dodging gives you a lot of invulnerability, but you can also parry an enemy and deal a powerful counter, or you can sneak up on them and backstab them, or you can run around them and backstab them. Most enemies will only attack you once, sometimes up to 3 times, before taking a breather, allowing you to attack back. If you don't rush in and spam the attack button like an idiot, you'll find yourself winning most encounters. This isn't God of War or Bayonetta where you get to look stylish and kick ass. This is a game where you have to consider the enemy's move and react to them. The game constantly teaches you to stay back and seek an optimal solution instead of rushing in. Through its level design and tricky little details, you'll start to learn how to be more patient and defensive, and your death count will reduce. It takes a while to get used to these kind of systems, and at times, the urge to call bullshit and quit is strong. I know my first time wasn't very cool looking. I remember whining about how the game was overrated and spouting death threats at the developer just to hide my sad, pathetic, bruised ego. Then I tried again, because I'm stupid and prideful, and started noticing little details like the world and the lore, and then I had to beat Smo and Ornstein, and I was so angry because I just couldn't fucking beat it. And one day, everything just sort of clicked. I was forced to play by the game's rules, and I did it. I beat them. And then everything else just fell into place. I needed that moment of victory where I couldn't cheese the boss or just play badly and still win. A mistake usually resulted in death, so I was forced to adapt. It's like that for many of those games. To get that Souls-like mentality that I talked about, I usually have to defeat a really powerful boss. And that's because bosses are the highlight of the game. Each one of them feels like a massive event, an acknowledgement from the world itself saying, oh, you reached that far, huh? Well, how do you fare with this? I adore boss fights. They're tougher, stronger, and a lot smarter than your typical enemies. Most of the time. Each boss is unique. Some are bigger than the damn screen, others have little goobers trying to kill you, and some decide to bring their boyfriend to jump your ass. However, most of them are cool enemy designs with a unique moveset that will try to kill you no matter how nicely you ask them to stop. Most importantly, bosses is when the game's difficulty jumps up, and it's where you can get stuck for quite a while. The whole intricate dance of learning the moveset of an enemy and waiting for an opening before striking design applies super heavily here, especially since some techniques like parrying and backstabbing have no effects on some of these bosses at all. You'll have to rely on the basics to beat most of them. It can be maddening at times to repeat, but there's a raw entertainment about fighting something that's stronger than most, learning its pattern through repetition, discovering weaknesses and openings to then deal the finishing blow. Nothing beats that feeling of seeing the words "victory achieved" on your screen. It feels like you went through one hell of an ordeal, but that you told the game to go fuck itself with your own artwork. Until it throws another location and boss at you, but just like me, you'll learn to smile at this and say, bring it on. It's the best part of the combat. It's where my skills and knowledge are tested. Other than exploration, bosses are what makes or kills these games for me. They represent every good and bad thing about the combat. So when they're excellent, they leave me satisfied to have even played those games. One of my biggest highs in gaming is when I beat Smo and Ornstein for the first time. Artorias still kicks my goddamn ass, and I love him all the same. Dark Souls is responsible for making me excited for bosses in other video games. Before, a boss for me was just a big enemy with a big pool of health, or some weird monster with a gimmick to defeat them. Some bosses were cool to fight, but I didn't pick up the game and went, oh my god, I wonder what bosses there's gonna be. Dark Souls kinda corrupted me on that aspect. That, and builds. Look, Dark Souls is an RPG, and with RPGs come different classes and stats to build your character from the ground up. At first, all of this feels confusing and kind of terrifying. At the beginning, the game asks you to choose a starting class, a starting item, and all you can think is that you don't know what or how the hell the game works. Seriously, I was like a fucking ball of anxiety the entire time I was making my character, and then they throw this stupid ring that's useless and think I'm a dumbass. Of course I'm gonna pick it. It probably leads to a secret area or some shit. I only discovered recently that the ring is only used to talk to the spider lady. I think you can fill in the blank on how I felt back then. Dark Souls doesn't care. You'll learn as you play, and if you make a mistake, you'll deal with it and hopefully overcome it. Most first playthroughs are pretty experimental. You'll switch weapons and armor very often. You won't ever feel powerful much, but this is where you get a feel for the game. Personally, my first build ever was a strength build. Why? Because I thought more strength equals more damage, so if I kill the enemy first, they can't kill me. I equipped the Evil Armor and Black Albert and basically became an unmovable wall of death. Sure, I couldn't really dodge or move well, but I was killing them, so who's winning? The game became a piece of cake at one point, and none of the bosses ever killed me. However, it did allow me to understand the scaling system on weapons and what each stats were for. So on my second run, I went with a pure dex build and beat the game again. While it wasn't my usual playstyle, I was a bit more proud of myself than the last time I fought with the Evil Armor. Once you start gaining a deeper understanding of the game, you start playing around more freely with your stats and build. Maybe instead of just increasing vigor and strength to do more damage, you'll fuck around with a dex build and find cool weapons like the Uchigatana. Or you'll build up that intelligence and faith to throw spells and miracle left and right, destroying your enemies with magic. Fuck it, become a pyromancer and set the whole world on fire. What are they gonna do? That's right, fucking nothing! There's even more build that I haven't talked about and wacky ass weapons that I probably don't know anything about because I'm not a Dark Souls expert. I could make this video longer and talk about everything the game has to offer in terms of build and weapons. Most people will have a right or wrong way to play this game. Some will always equip a shield no matter what. Some say magic is filthy and disgusting cowardly behavior, and others will praise the flame and nothing but the flame as they burn your corpse to a crisp. I personally say, the more damage you do, everything matters less. And also fuck dex build, because they're lame. My other tip that I recommend is not listening to anyone's opinion. Otherwise you'll overhear some virgin calling you a racial slur for daring you to play a strength build and not playing to a new game plus 7. Rest assured, these people will never have sex and will be cursed to sleep with both sides of their pillows warm at night. For this specific run, I decided to go with another dex build, Uchigatana style, but this time I wanted to see if I could wield pyromancy as well. I don't like dex build, but I thought some change would be nice for once. Safe to say, I still very much hate dex build with a passion. Though pyromancy was pretty fun. If you start messing around with builds though, this is where you'll start to see the cracks in the game, because as much as I like remembering the good parts, revisiting the game today made me aware of its glaring issues. During my time revisiting the game, it didn't take long for me to remember how much I loved the world and combat. Unfortunately, it also didn't take long to remember how old this game is and some of the annoying quirks it has. To be direct, the balancing is complete nonsense. Yes, most FromSoft games have terrible balancing issues, so this isn't just a problem with Dark Souls 1. But it's not because the whole franchise has this problem that we get to ignore it on this game. Strength build with Evil Armor is completely fucking broken. Dodging, parrying, backstabbing, waiting for an opening, you can disregard all of this and just hit the enemy until they give up. Sometimes you'll have to press the heal button, but it's mostly a minor inconvenience to you than it is a requirement for winning. Pyromancy burns everything. You don't even need to level up your instat. You can just up the weapon itself, and it just burns everything with no mercy. And may the bosses find Hala in the afterlife. They'll sure see whatever fucked up monster you became as soon as you picked up a magic build. I mean, the reason why this game was really hard when I first touched it was because I didn't know what the hell I was building. I was putting points in stats that my weapon was probably not even using. I probably didn't even know what the attunement stat did, and I'm sure my dumbass invested 2 or 3 level into it. For all I knew, I saw strength and vigor and put all my points into those, sometimes elemental or endurance. When you do barely any damage to the boss, but they kill you in 2 hits, it feels like the game is laughing at you. It feels like an unfair situation. It feels like Dark Souls is too hard. But as soon as you grasp how to build, it feels like Dark Souls is too easy now. Other than the dex build, which are fucking pathetic, most builds in the game will annihilate most bosses very easily. Mind you, this is even talking about PvP, which I won't talk about because I usually play these games offline because, much like depression, I prefer mending my broken ego alone. Wait, Leo, you say, what about those amazing bosses you were talking about? Surely they're still hard to take down even if you are powerful, right? Yeah, about that. After playing every other Souls game, the boss fights in Dark Souls 1 feels like pushover. Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring have enemies with the rage turned on permanently, with movesets that can combo you to death in a matter of seconds. For most Dark Souls bosses, you just gotta dodge the first attack and stick to their ass, and you've won. Sure, sometimes a wonky ass hitbox will get you, or you'll be completely flabbergasted at the fact that the vomit this shithead spews can break your weapon and forget to dodge. But other than that, there's not much they can do. They usually have one or two move if you're behind them, and they're usually predictable enough to dodge, or they don't do enough damage to truly be dangerous. They're giants and super imposing, sure, but they usually have one strat and they don't move away from it, which is super easy to abuse. If they ain't piss poor easy, they're just weird. Some of them are asking to fucking die, and if you've got a good build, they'll get annihilated before the boss has time to get good. And then there's the Capra Demon, who fucking locks you in a tiny ass closet-sized arena with two dogs immediately on you before you can even see beyond the fog that blinds you. And this man will hit you through pillars and stairs while you can't, because the game decided that your sword can get stuck on the environment all around you. Or the Bed of Chaos, which made me want to turn off the game immediately. God, I do love having to run back to the arena for 2 minutes straight and praying for the boss to not do a shitty move while the floor is crumbling, killing me in one hit, making the entire combat system useless. Maybe video games are bad for my health. There are some good bosses like Smo and Ornstein, which is one of the best boss fights in the entire franchise. I hate them both very much, but they're well designed and I always get some dopamine from kicking their asses. Artorias and Manus are pretty much the quality I expect of Souls games now. Most early bosses like the Gargoyle, Sif, and Quelaag are pretty well designed, but most of the game is filled with bosses who aren't flexible enough compared to the player, or stupidly frustrating bosses that makes you want to paint the wall of your room red. The late game bosses, Sif, the Four King, Nito, and the Bed of Chaos are so annoying. Nito has all these skeletons around, making the fight a pain in the ass. The Four King are so forgettable because it's basically a damage check, and Sif is the easiest piece of shit to abuse of them all. The only difficult fight in here is Bed of Chaos, and the less I talk about it, the better my mental health will be. I'm not saying that most of the bosses in the games are bad. They were impressive when I first played, and they were dangerous to deal with. But now with Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne under my belt, they're just hopelessly outmatched by my experience, or they're poorly designed and leave a bad taste in my mouth. Most of these are in the late game, and the late game, it might be one of the things responsible for making me not want to touch this game anymore. On paper, it feels like it should be the best part of the game. You just finished beating Anor Londo in one of the toughest fights in the game, and then you're being told that you are to become the chosen undead to succeed Lord Gwyn by feeding the fire with your own soul, because you did all these things. Not because the game decided that you were the chosen one, you beat all these bosses, therefore you become the chosen one. To do that, you need to collect the Lord Souls from Sieve the Scaleless, the Four Kings of New Londo, the Witch of Izalith, and Grave Lord Nito. You can do all these bosses in whatever order you want. You get to explore Lost Izalith, home of the witch and her children, the Catacomb where Nito resides in, the Duke's Archive where Sieve conducted his maddening and cruel experiment, and finally, the New Londo runes, which were flooded to contain the Abyss. Doesn't it sound fucking sick? Do you feel excited? Yeah, I was as well. The bells were awesome, and Sen's Fortress and Anor Londo were the peak, but this finals quest was going to beat all of this. So explain to me why it's the worst fucking part of the game. You can't see shit in the Catacomb, constantly getting lost and frustrated because you have to use a shitty item just to fucking see the place. Interesting gameplay mechanic and claustrophobia, you say? I kind of agree. Fuck you, I reply. Duke's Archive is linear, short, and honestly nothing to write home about. At best, it's a decent area to look at. I even forgot that it existed while replaying. New Londo Runes is probably the best out of all four, but constantly having to use Transcend Curse just to deal with ghosts is kind of annoying. Then Lost Izalith. My god, this looks fucking unfinished. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it was, because the level of quality has dropped down massively. Most of the time, there's not even a floor to walk on, it's just lava. and their solution is to give you an item to counter that? What the fuck happened here? These are honestly the worst part of Dark Souls, and like I said, the reason why I didn't want to replay this for so long. Guess my brain did a purge of Lost Isolus because I was absolutely amazed at how terrible this area is when I replay through it. The game drops the ball hard during late game, and you can notice it very easily because the last areas before it, and Orlando, was practically the peak of the game. Then all of a sudden, the quality just crashes down and dies of an atrocious disease. Yeah, some of these locations are interesting to look at, the whole exploration part is still fun, but when these areas have annoying mechanics to deal with and shitty boss fights, it's hard to get invested through all the frustration. There's still some good moments here and there, like opening the gate to unflood New Londo and discovering a new layers to the city, or, you know, the claustrophobia from the catacomb. But compared to the beginning and middle, they're a bit rarer. I genuinely hated playing through this again. I was having no fucking fun whatsoever, constantly getting mad at stupid shit and just wishing I could close the game and boot up Elden Ring. It also doesn't help when the game is not very well optimized, let's say. Look, Dark Souls is old. I get that the controls cannot be like Elden Ring or even Dark Souls 3, but Jesus Christ, it is so fucking clunky even in the remaster. I don't know if it's just me or the PC version, but trying to dodge in a specific direction while targeting an enemy usually made me dodge straight forward or to the side completely, which made reaching the behind of enemies a pain in the fucking ass. During Artorias and Manus, I had to avoid using lock-on because using it was akin to speedrunning how fast I could fucking die. The platforming, running around, balancing on tight narrow platforms, moving around doesn't feel great. I get that this could be my fault for playing the newer games, but coming back to Dark Souls 1 is such a slap in the face. Backstabbing is not consistent at all, some of the hitboxes are baffling at times, and I'd prefer deep throating a cactus with no lube than doing more platforming. Who the fuck thought that the button to run was the perfect button to jump? Seriously, every time I'm running away and try to dodge, I end up jumping and getting myself fucked by the enemy. Doesn't help that the PC version of this game completely blows dick. Prepare to Die edition runs similarly to an amputated hamster in a wheel. Not very well. The game was not functioning, no matter what I did. I don't know what kind of witchcraft I pulled back in the days to get this shit working, but a couple of virgins must have died horrible deaths because there were 4 playthroughs on this save file. When I tried booting up the game with a mod called DS Fix, which basically corrects all the graphical issues and allows the game to run at 60 FPS properly, my character was in Blighttown with the camera rotating for eternity. My controller was unresponsive, and unplugging everything and resetting the game wasn't fixing the camera issue. My PC then made a weird noise akin to choking on vomit before assassinating the game right before my eyes. Thus, $50 were spent on buying the remaster of the game, which is fucking lazy. Doesn't look that good, and fixed nothing from the original. But hey, I can at least play the fucking thing, so hooray for me. With all these annoying issues, this outdated boss design, the terrible late game, it doesn't surprise me that I was more fond of picking Bloodborne or Dark Souls 3 back up. Yet, I still remember Dark Souls for its insane world building and engaging combat nonetheless. And most importantly, I remember the game for its strong narrative theme. In case I haven't been crystal clear about the world of Lordran, the story is depressing as shit. Despair oozes from each place, and you find more suffering and death than anything else in this Forsaken Kingdom. Most undead have turned hollow and attack anyone blindly. The Witch of Izalith has corrupted her entire family by trying to recreate a replacement for the First Flame, creating the Chaos Flame and an army of demons to ravage the kingdom. New Londo was flooded because of the Abyss threatening to take over, and Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, has become hollow, attacking anyone trying to reach the First Flame. This place is fucked. Meanwhile, your character's whole purpose is to reignite the flame to prolong the age of fire just a bit longer so that it may fade and the world start this process all over again in a couple of years. The other option is to let the flame die and return to the age of darkness, which is pretty unclear whether it's a good or bad thing. There's no other option, otherwise you'll go hollow. None of the other people in this world has it any better. Most NPCs you meet either end up dead or forgotten and lost. The people you meet never stay in one place. Some of them kill each other, and of course, some will try to end your life due to your choices or just because they can. Even the boss's story are just as tragic. Artorias, Bed of Chaos, Gwyn, all these beings used to be someone, but now they're nothing but monsters awaiting death. Dark Souls is bleak. As beautiful as the game can be at times while exploring the ruins of Lordran, there's a constant reminder that this place used to be something. New Londo didn't used to be flooded. Ulasil wasn't corrupted by the Abyss. Lost Isolus wasn't a nest for demons. They used to be actual places, populated with people. They used to be alive. But what you are seeing in the game now is their grave. Even Anor Londo, the city of the gods, untainted by the outside world, is nothing but an illusion created by Gwendolyn and some twisted hope to guard what was left of Anor Londo. Destroying this illusion reveals just how empty and sad Anor Londo truly is. It suffers the same fate as every other location in Lordran. Even in combat, the world of Lordran is constantly at your throat. One wrong move and you'll die, losing your humanity and getting closer to becoming hollow. Enemies will ambush you, curse you, poison you, burn you. Try anything to make sure that you will follow the fate of every undead in this broken kingdom. And if you dare survive, the bosses will make sure you won't. I used to find it very hard to enjoy depressing stories. I get invested in worlds and characters super easily, so when bad things happen to them, I can't help but put myself in their shoes and imagine what it would be like. With my overactive imagination, it's very often that I find myself getting in a loop of negative emotions. Back then, I just wanted to experience a happy and badass media instead, because facing those negative emotions kind of scared me. At least, I'm forced to assume that was the case, because I never thought about it as much before now. But in Dark Souls, you still walk forward, even when everything is dead. You keep on fighting and fighting, vanquishing boss after boss towards the next goal. Even after dying over and over and over, you get back up and you fight. If the wall is impossible to climb, then you break it. You change your build, you change weapons, you equip different armor, you try different strategies in the hope that this run will be the one. Even when everything seems hopeless, you still throw yourself at the wall and learn something new with each death. As a player, your will is parallel to the character you play. You refuse to give up against this cruel world. Therefore, your character doesn't go hollow and still fight on. Solaire doesn't need to die. You can kill that maggot before he even has a chance to encounter it, and then summon him for the final fight against Gwyn. You can end the suffering of Artorias, kill Manus, and save the princess of Ulasil. You can end the suffering of the witch and her children, allowing them all eternal rest. Even at the end of it all, you still have a choice to rekindle the fire or let it die. While the age of darkness may be uncertain, it could also lead to prosperity for mankind. But most importantly, this is your choice. It may seem like nothing, but in a world as broken as Dark Souls, still having the choice to decide your fate is honestly powerful. No matter how fucked this world is, no matter how ruined the kingdom of Lordran is, you are here. You still walk forward and you still go on, no matter what. And in some weird way, you realize that there's still a lingering sense of hope powering your steps forward. Dark Souls' careful balance of despair and hope is what makes the story that the game is telling so impacting. It will show you the worst of humanity, but will also demonstrate just how far humans can go before even considering surrender. It will show a flickering fire willing to stay lit, no matter how oppressive the darkness becomes. In the end, the kingdom is still in shambles. People are dying, and you, the player, and the people around are still walking forward with purpose, because that's what humans do. We find purpose, no matter how impossible the situation seems. I've grown to love stories of people surmounting impossible odds because of Dark Souls. It always helps to deal with the hardship of life, because it reminds me that no matter how hard or impossible life becomes, we humans have the power and an indomitable spirit to challenge ourselves and prove the world just how wrong it was for underestimating us. Many pieces of media have told that lesson in so many ways. ReZero, one of my favorite pieces of media, tells a similar tale, and I doubt I'd ever appreciated the way I do now before I played Dark Souls. Nowadays, it's these types of games and narrative that makes me happy, no matter how flawed they are. It might be silly for some of you, but Dark Souls helped combat my dislikes of facing negative emotions in media, even if I never was conscious of this. This is the heart of Dark Souls. This is why it was important to me. And if there isn't beauty in that, then I don't know the meaning of the word. Dark Souls 2 was a frustrating mess. The game's world makes no logic whatsoever, the balance that I talked about isn't as present, and the game is a mess to play. As far as the story goes, I wasn't able to get into it as much because of how the world was so broken. Not broken in the narrative sense, mind you. Broken as in, you climb up a windmill to find fucking Bowser's castle from Super Mario 64 above. The game structure is linear and straightforward, and most of the time you'll rely on teleporting to your destination instead of finding it by exploring. The combat is the worst, making me want to tear my balls off. Every encounter is an ambush, or multiple enemies thrown at once, or a stupid fucking trap that leads you to being poisoned or have your gears broken. Lots more bosses in this one compared to Dark Souls 1, except they're somehow worse than the first game, and some of them are just reskin. Quantity over quality was the name of the game. I despise this game, and I never ever want to retouch it again. Bloodborne was fantastic though. It used Eldritch Aura to make areas terrifying and disgusting to look at, and the lore of the game was interesting to peer at. They also made the game more aggressive, fast-paced, and this is where FromSoftwares learned a lot about what makes Dark Souls tick. The world did feel connected, and even though it still had that straightforward design about it, I was still immersed in Yharnam, fighting bosses that made my blood pump and getting my mind broken by the secrets lying beneath. Bloodborne is the only reason why I own a PS4 to this day. It also used to be my favorite game from FromSoft because it was the closest experience to Dark Souls without the issue the game had. Dark Souls 3 stole my damn time from me at one point. I played one winter and never stopped playing until I had discovered absolutely everything about it. As soon as I started, I was hooked till the end of the game. The combat is the best of the series. Weapon arts are so cool looking, and every enemy is much more aggressive and dangerous. The controls are also smooth, and the game looks amazing on PC. The boss fights were impressive, and some actually had me stuck for a couple of hours before defeating them. It still didn't have that exploration and interconnectivity that I was looking for, but in terms of combat and bosses, Dark Souls 3 is still my favorite, and Elden Ring, despite not having finished it yet, is a fucking joy to play. The exploration is better than Dark Souls, the combat is just as amazing, and the location you explore is popping questions in my brain left and right. I'm this fucking close to opening Vati Vidya's channel and just watch everything. I have problem with some of the bosses. Godric, Radon, Margit, Renala, Astel, Nile, Fire Giant, those had my jaw wide open with how impressive they were. The rest though, they kind of stink. However, I'm not done with Elden Ring, so my opinion can vastly change compared to previous titles. I am enjoying the game a whole lot though, and right now I'm reaching a point where I might call it my favorite Souls game. I wouldn't have played any of these games without Dark Souls. Without Dark Souls, I wouldn't have the same attitude I have when I play hard games. Without Dark Souls, I wouldn't have solidified my love for exploration and adventures. Without Dark Souls, I wouldn't have a better understanding of the concept of despair and hope, and I wouldn't enjoy some of my favorite stories now. Without Dark Souls, FromSoftwares wouldn't have hit the mainstream and make a bunch more games that people will love to death. They wouldn't have felt confident releasing something like Elden Ring. They wouldn't have won Game of the Year for Elden Ring and stand proud. I love this game, even with all its annoying flaws in old age. It changed how I see games, and it still influences my perspective on video games to this day. How world building is delivered, what makes exploration exciting, what kind of difficulty enhances my experience. Dark Souls helped me find what I really like about gaming. Thanks to it, I'm capable of creating deeper, more meaningful story when I write, and while it may sound silly, I'm capable of facing the hardship of life with a better attitude. Revisiting the game, there were a lot of frustrations to be found, and it ended on a bit of a sad note when I discovered that I much prefer future titles. But I also saw that there was something that I did love, and it wasn't just nostalgia talking in my head, or it wasn't just because it was the first game I played with the whole franchise. There was a beauty to the first game, and revisiting that allowed me to appreciate it even more. Because while yes, the sequels will have better combat, better world, better lore, and just function better as video games, none of them will ever capture the magic of Dark Souls that bewitched me that day. Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, they're superior games in my opinion, and I do have fond memories of them. But Dark Souls has its unique charm that makes it shine differently compared to others. For that, it will always hold a special place in my heart. One thing is sure though, and it's that I'm grateful for being alive in the same age that this game got released, and I'm grateful that I had the chance to play it in this lifetime. Thank you, FromSoft, for making such a beautiful game. Thank you, Miyazaki, for pushing through with your idea. And thank you, everyone in the development team, for making sure we had a good game in our hands. Thank you, Dark Souls, for being so important to me.